Good morning, Leader.
Right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Executive, and welcome to those people who are watching online. So I think that's all I've got to say. So are there any declarations of interest? Oh, sorry, apologies for absence. We have some.
Thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Corey and Councillor Davey. We also have apologies from Debbie Barnes, Chief Executive.
Thank you. Are there any further apologies? I think not. Okay, we'll move on to item 2. Any declaration of councillors' interest, please? I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on to item 3 then, announcements. Well, firstly, I would like to welcome Martin Samuels, who is joining us today. He's not quite in post yet as our new Director of Adult Services, but he's there sitting next to the extravagantly attired Glenn Garrett. So Glenn's here, but welcome, Martin. Although you're not in post yet, it's good to see you here already, and we look forward to working with you. Any further announcements by any of the executive, please? Okay, we'll move on then to the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of September 2023. Is it your wish I sign these as a true and accurate record? Is that agreed? Thank you. No dissents? You're not dissenting, are you, Mrs. Wood? Agreeing? All right, good. Okay, we move on to item 5 then, which is the first substantive item, which is North Highcombe Relief Road planning application. So, Councillor Davis, or start with you, please.
Just very quickly, I'll introduce it. Thank you. As colleagues will know, this is an exciting scheme that has been some years in the planning. I think actually the first land was secured before I was even a member of the authority. So it's a strategic investment that the council has been thinking about for some time. There's a lot of good work gone into it to secure national funding, and it will unlock probably the busiest and most congested area of our road network that we look after at the moment, as well as building on the success of the LEB. But before I say anything that's wrong, I'll pass over to, I think, Sam Edwards, who's our Senior Project Leader on the team. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. So this paper that we're bringing today in relation to the key decision, it's got 2 elements to it. The first is to agree the existing alignment of this road was agreed at this committee in 2006. This report agrees a slightly realigned, but it's broadly on the same line, and I'll go into why, of what we're looking to seek approval to change it to. The other element of the report today is to seek approval to submit a planning application that we're, if given approval, looking to do later this month towards the end of it. So I've just got a short presentation to pick those elements up. I'll just share that on the screen. So yeah, I thought the easiest one first is to go through the route alignment and what's broadly changed on there. So those 4 areas are the blue line that you can see that is the 2006 agreed alignment of the road. The red is what we're seeking to submit for planning application, which you can see is broadly along the same line, but it is slightly different. The reason for those differences starting from the left, so from the west working eastwards to the right, there's a biodigester that's been constructed since the 2006 alignment was agreed. We've proposed to move the alignment out to avoid the biodigester, so avoid the need to procure that business and potentially demolish it as part of the scheme. So moving the road out has added minimal cost, certainly in relation to what it would have cost to disband the business that's there. The second from the left, so this is avoiding the Environment Agency flood bund. There's an existing bund that runs in a east-west direction. The existing alignment 2006 conflicted with that bund, and by doing so you get into, by affecting it, you get into Reservoir Act issues, which would then go to the Secretary of State and increase costs considerably. So we've marginally moved the alignment further north to avoid the flood bund entirely. We've had those discussions with the Environment Agency. We're fully happy that we're no longer in the issues about the Reservoir Act. The 2 further to the right, the main one is in the top there, avoiding very poor ground conditions. Over this year, many people may have seen some excavations going on along the length of the road. All those excavations in relation to ground investigation studies. What we found along the Lincoln edge there, around where the Viking Way is very poor ground conditions. So there is potential engineering remediation we can do there, but it would be significant piled wall to actually stabilise the ground. However, it is localised, that particular poor area. So what we've done is we've proposed to move the road as the red line is slightly further east to avoid the particularly weak area. And by moving it to the right there, it sort of realigns it away from the blue line. So that reduces the significant cost that we would have to put in place to stabilise the ground. What is really, really important to stress, as we have done through the engagement exercises with the public as well, is where we purchased the properties on Station Road a good 10 plus years ago. We have not moved away from where we would go through, so it's the same properties. So as far as people's houses and properties and homes, we will not need to procure any more or have procured any that we don't need to now, if that makes sense. So we've basically pivoted around the same position on Station Road. Another key element of this paper is, as an update to this committee, is the cost. So that table there is what we presented earlier in the year, or it was sort of last year now, around what the cost range is when we entered into a contract with Balfour Beatty as the design and build contractor. Our total low, high and medium range was 179 to 212, with the most likely being 193 million. The evolution of that is fairly minimal, in that the low range has increased by 1.1 million, so 0.6%. The high range has decreased by 4.2 million, which is about 2%, and the likely range has increased by about 300,000 at 0.2%. So this is an ideal solution, really. I know many people may think the low has increased, that's bad, but actually, as we gained more information, we've been able to narrow that range because we know more about what risks aren't going to, and we've been able to design them out. And the opportunities, some of those we haven't been able to take for engineering reasons. But the likely has broadly stayed very, very similar. Now, that may sound like it's of that scale of numbers, that it's sort of somebody picking a number out of the air. And just to give a bit of background to that range, and particularly the 193.7, what the contractor's done is they've actually gone out to the market, to all the subcontractors, over 73 subcontractors. And we've got real life prices on based off what it would be as if they were to build it next year. We then applied BCIS data inflation to that value, along with risk that feeds it into that as well. So that is as confident as we can be about what is real life prices, rather than an individual doing an estimate of what it would cost to deliver the scheme. So I think that's relatively good news. Now, the final bit I was going to do, and I just seek your view, Chair, is I've got the fly-through. But I'm very conscious in the paper there's a lot of drawings and times, whether we want to go through a drawing, or I'm happy to share the fly-through on screen, if that would be helpful. Okay. Just give me a minute while I share that. Okay, because I'm showing on Teams, it does go slightly jerky, but hopefully it will pick up. So this is Pennell's Roundabout, as we know it, or North Icon Roundabout at the A46. So this is the most westerly direction of it. So that's the proposed visualization of what it will be when it's finished. So that roundabout is about twice the size, or just over twice the size of the existing roundabout that I think many here and many of the public will know has significant issues. In addition to that, we're going to put traffic lights on the roundabout to make it work far more effectively than it does now, similar to what we did at Holdingham Roundabout about a year or so ago. Included with this, there's also pedestrian phases for walking and cycling throughout it, and that runs down the whole length of the road as well. So as I say, there's a 3-metre wide footway cycleway that runs down the length. Mine's going, but hopefully it will catch up soon. In a number of places we've got ponds, They will act as habitat ponds, but actually if they're for highway purposes for containing the surface water so we don't flood the Witham and the IDB drains during flood conditions, they hold the water and discharge it at a regular basis. On the left there you can see the biodigester. So this is where the road did go through it, and you can see it's now moved away from it so we don't interact with it, and the business can continue to operate as it does now. And then the second roundabout we get to is at South Highcombe. So this is a new roundabout that goes on South Highcombe. There's like I said, there's a 3 metre wide footway cycleway that runs east to west along. It's similar to what we did with the Eastern Bypass. The slight difference with this is the crossing actually has a pedestrian crossing, so a push button traffic lights to actually cross across there, which is 70 metres back from the giveaway line. We'll catch up in a moment. So now we've got down to what's called Wath Lane. So this is a public right-of-way. So we'll be putting a bridge in there to maintain the public right-of-way, but also because we're severing land there, that bridge will be a combination bridge for farm machinery as well. Rather than having to go on a long detour around, they'll be able to access the land so that their severance is significantly reduced, or the impact of it. So on the right, let me catch this up. On the right there, just that area there, that's the flood bund I was talking about. So before it actually went through that bund in sort of that direction. So that's where we've moved it on the screen slightly to the left to avoid it. So there's no conflict between the two. And along the length of this, we have a variability of landscaping quite extensive, and also noise attenuation where required. So this is probably the more significant bridge. So this is a 3-span bridge over the River Witham. What I will stress is it's not the same scale as we built when we did the Eastern Bypass, because this river's not navigable at this stage, so you don't need to get the clearance over the water. So it's relatively low and therefore not as significant piece of infrastructure as what we did on the Eastern Bypass when that was built. And then this brings us to Brant Road. So the existing Brant Road runs through there. So what we've done on most of the roundabouts is we've actually designed them, we've built them offline from the existing road. So we can build the roundabout in the field while the travelling public continue to travel along the roads. When the roundabout's built, we then move the traffic onto the new roundabout, where we then demolish the old section between there to minimise the disruption to the travelling public. We've been able to manage that on all of the roundabouts except for Grantham Road roundabout, which I'll come on to. Also, following the engagement, there was a lot of concerns about stopping up Somerton Gate Lane that runs down there, because of one way out and one way in and one way out access, and the access onto it up onto the top at Waddington is very poor and very steep, so in icy conditions. So we've actually maintained this, but instead of putting a bridge in, we're basically effectively building another bit of Somerton Gate Lane down here, which will then tie into Brant Road around there. So it's a much more efficient way and economical way of maintaining the connection. So that's Waddington. So on the left is, sort of, as I know it, the low fields and the low side of Waddington, and on the top on the right. So this is the area where we purchased the properties, which you can see would be demolished as part of the scheme. I'll just stop it when it gets round. So the way we're looking to do this, again, this is the existing station road here. Once the cursor catches up. There we go. So that's the existing station road there. So what we're doing is we're building the new station road offline, building the bridge so the public can continue, so we're not severing Waddington in any way during the works. Then we will move the traffic onto the new road, the new bridge, and then cut out what we call the plug that runs through, because the relief road is 5 or 6 metres lower than Station Road. Station Road stays the same level, and we tunnel down underneath it, similar to how we've done at on the LEB at Haington Road with the Haington Road road bridge, and on the existing Western bypass at Burton Road Bridge. And all the property that remain will have access onto Station Road as they do now. And there's quite extensive vegetation, planting and noise attenuation fencing through this area as well. And that's just an image just to show this is, as you can see, it's cut down into the cut, so Station Road is above you, and the relief road will be travelling underneath it. So I mentioned earlier about this poor ground condition, so that's about that section up around there where the cursor is. So that's where we move the alignment away from it. But you can see the sort of lighter green, it's still poor, so it's rather than doing what you tend to do, your embankment cuttings are a 1 in 3, these are actually a 1 in 7. So it's a very slack slope to make sure that it doesn't slip and fall, and it's got the right stability for the road. And that's why the extent is so large, but we are planning significant planting in those areas. Sorry, my connection has just dropped out. There we go, I'm back in again, I think. And then this brings us up to Grantham Road, so that's RF Waddington in the top right there. So this is the A607 Grantham Road. This is the one roundabout we've had to design on line of the existing road, which presents some difficulties. So we'll have to do a careful level of phasing to keep traffic moving on the A607, similar to when we built the A15 and the B1188 Lincoln Road roundabout for the Eastern Bypass. So it's a frustration for why we can't, but it's not insurmountable in any way. Should also just point out there were a lot of concerns at the second engagement that we did with the public about severance of the Viking Way, and it's not so clear on this, but we've put a lot of mitigation into that for those connections back in on both the east and west and all sides, and the feedback at the third engagement was really positive from the public on what we've done. And then the final section brings us up to where the Eastern Bypass finished at the A15. And I know I said at the start, but just to stress, there is a 3 metre wide footway cycleway that runs the whole length of this. And I should have just reminded the public and everyone at the start that this is a dual carriageway scheme, so two-purpose lanes in each direction. So that's the application that we are looking to put in for planning permission and forms part of this key decision. And I'd probably pause there and request whether there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Sam. Yes, it sort of does bring it to life if you do the flyover, and we can all see what exactly is entailed. And as Councillor Davis said, this has been a long. Well, actually, I remember protecting over 20 years ago now, where we actually acquired, started the business of where the houses are, and obviously that is now been sorted out, and I think there will be all the people now resident there are aware either, so that issue has been resolved satisfactorily, I think, so the road can continue. And of course it is the missing link of the ring road around Lincoln, but I think the most important thing for locally, it will help Lincoln, but particularly Highcombe, whereas we all know the traffic situation is pretty appalling in Lincoln and around Highcombe, and that's be a great benefit. So I'll ask, first of all, Councillor Brooks, who is on the screen, just to report back on the discussion that was had, or the debate that was had at the Transport Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Yes, the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee considered the report on the North Highcombe Relief Road at its meeting on the 11th of September 2023. which was the permission to submit planning application, and unanimously supported the recommendation to the executive. The following points were highlighted, and they are in the report to the executive. The following points were highlighted. The use of traffic signals at the Highcombe roundabout was queried, as members were sceptical about the effectiveness of traffic lights on roundabouts. But officers explained that due to the high number of vehicles using the roundabout, combined with it being a five-arm roundabout, opposed to a four-arm roundabout, without traffic lights, simply would not operate effectively. Traffic lights offer the solution that controls traffic flow and maintains access opportunities for all arms. And the point was made that the asset is a National Highways asset, and as the asset is theirs, it wouldn't be accepted should it not provide the appropriate traffic relief. Members also emphasised that design should reflect future infrastructure developments, especially on roundabouts. That is the provision for the design and development of service areas and filling stations to ensure that drivers were not deterred from travelling through Lincoln when not necessary. It was also noted there was a margin for further economic development improvements in the areas where the North Highcombe Relief Road extended into. Officers assured members that the design took under consideration future plans and needs for development, housing and economic growth as outlined in the Central Lincolnshire Local Plan. Other developments would not be considered in the design of the road, as otherwise this would be deemed as public money being used to benefit private businesses. The design does not predicate any retrospective development. However, these would need to be assessed at the time of planning submission on how it will impact the highways network, and thus what improvements the developer would need to make to mitigate those impacts. Members did request for cautious consideration of the budgets and costs, and received assurances from leading officers that inflation and in fluctuations observed in the past 18 months were factored in, and also that future inflation had been factored in. And that's the observations of the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mike. Right, could we just deal with, I think there's two issues that just, I think they were explored at the Scrutiny Committee. The first was traffic lights on the roundabout. Sam.
Yeah, so we initially, as part of the outline business case, we put forward various options until you get into further details, of which some of them were not traffic light to increase the size. When we went through the traffic modelling, to put it simply, they just didn't work. They didn't provide the relief to the traffic as what's required. The reason being because of the orientation of the roundabout, as Councillor Brooks mentioned about the 5 lanes into that. What's crucial is the distance between the lanes as you're approaching. So if there's a very small distance, then actually, and a heavy flow, which there will be through here, you get very few opportunities to get out into it. So then and then it becomes like a nasty cycle that you never get out. The queues get bigger and they coming forward. So in nature, in the nature of this type of flow and this orientation, traffic lights did appease the traffic because it gives that control and gives that fair sort of opportunity to go through. The only leg that we've got that doesn't have traffic lights is the one coming from, I think it's Middle Lane, the one where the petrol station goes into Thorpe on the Hill. The reason being that the low level of traffic that comes through there doesn't require it, and it will still have reasonable opportunity, which it struggles with now. And that was proven through the modelling, and that's similar to what we've done at Holdingham roundabout, where actually the lane that comes out of Sleaford doesn't have traffic lights on it and operates well, and people have the opportunity to exit.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, just so I'm clear, I mean, I'm not the greatest fan of traffic lights, but I have to say the Holding roundabout was an issue, and there was long queues on the A15 before traffic lights, because A17 traffic was too heavy. So that actually has been very successful. So I think there was, so I would fully support on the five lane roundabout. Is one of the 4-lane roundabouts also going to have traffic lights then, are you saying?
No. All the other roundabouts are free flow. This is the only roundabout that has traffic lights because of the scale of the traffic, because of the A46 that comes from.
Yeah.
From
So personally, I would think my personal view, and I think we would agree that as Holdingham has worked, it shows the proof of concept is there that would seem a reasonable thing. Second one is about the economic development and the issue about, I think bring in, I do see there is part of the, it is a planning application discussion this, but there is £10,000 from developer contributions. So I just want to walk through what exactly that means. Has permission been granted? Is it in some sort of local plan, or just so we understand that issue, because it did sound a little bit complicated.
Yeah, so as part of the modelling and the design of the scheme, we've accounted for all the planned development that's in the Central Lincolnshire local plan. The key one in location to that is the southwest quadrant zoo that sits within there, and the 10 million that's referred to is the forward funding. So the intention of the county council forward funds that, and then the county council recoups that a minimum of 10 million section 106 when the development comes forward. And that's identified as clearly in the local plan as well. That there's an expectation, and our development management colleagues as well as myself are in those discussions with the developer and the landowners about that purpose. With regards to other developments that are outside of the local plan, clearly those can't be accounted for within the scheme. However, there was a specific query at Highways and Transport, for example, a petrol station or something of that nature. Now, we wouldn't modern standards of how you cater for these, you wouldn't put an extra leg on a roundabout. What you would have is sort of as you exit the roundabout in one quadrant, you'd have a left off filter lane and then a left back onto it. So actually you don't need to change the orientation of the road other than retrofitting it afterwards. But we haven't done that as part of the scheme because we get into legal subsidy control issues about using public funding for private developments. But there's absolutely no reason why it couldn't be retrofitted later after the delivery of this scheme.
Thank you, that's clear. But obviously any further developments would the 106 would have to relate to other infrastructure, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so I haven't got the details on me of the exact, but the southwest quadrant identifies directly to this as section 106, along with other requirements within there like education and housing and home care and things like that. But as expected and what is contained in the local plan, there is a minimum of 10 million that is expected over the life of the southwest quadrant coming through to put back into the forward funding that the county council would put forward.
Yeah, it was 10 million, not 10,000. I thought when I said it, that doesn't sound right. Thank you for that. Other questions, comments, please? Councillor Betroyd.
Thank you. It's one that I have sort of raised before, but on the North Highcombe roundabout, every section of road's got a crossing apart from the one up between the Bentley and the service station, and I regularly see people jumping and walking across that bit of road, and I just wondered whether you could explain why that section of road didn't have anything, because it seems the most obvious one to put something across.
So yes, there's an existing public right-of-way that is, in my professional views, quite dangerous, that goes across the A46 on the National Highway network. There are few that use it, but not many from the surveys that we've done because of most likely the danger. Now, we did initially look at actually putting an improved pedestrian crossing, but actually once you get to the east side, so that's where sort of the Gamekeeper is and the Bentley roundabout, there isn't the actual width to get through there. Currently, there's a very minor sort of metre wide that's overgrown path that goes through there, and there isn't any other further room because of the overhead tower cable that's there, other than going through private land. So we spoke to those that use the area. We spoke to the Public Rights of Way team, and a lot of the residents in Thorpe on the Hill were predominantly the ones that use it. And actually, they don't really want to cross it at that location because it doesn't cross to where they want to be. So what we're doing is it's hard to explain here, but there's a public right of way that comes down middle lane and then goes across the field to access this crossing. Instead, we're going to build a footpath down middle lane to the roundabout and then cross round from, say, the the 9 o'clock round to the 3 o'clock around the bottom. And that means that you also got access to the footway cycleway that's on the A46 that runs down to Witham St Hughes. And it also means by having the crossing on the south side, initially we did have a footbridge there crossing the A46, but because it's got traffic lights in, we don't need the bridge, which takes it out because we can utilise the traffic lights and therefore reduce costs. And that doesn't have any impact on the traffic flow because they phase between the roundabouts.
That's, yeah, with the traffic lights, that will enable that, won't it? Good. Any further questions? Councillor Woody?
Thank you, Leader. And it really is very much to concur with the comments you made about the Holdingham roundabout. It really does work, and it not just works, but it is actually an improvement in driving round there. If anyone needs any further convincing, then I would suggest that if they've got a few hours in their day, they probably go around that roundabout. But it's the sequencing of the lights as well that makes all the difference, and that traffic really does keep moving all the time. So, yeah, when there's 5 spines, it works. Thank you.
See, as this is really effectively a planning, agreement to go to planning. Obviously, not just in Lincolnshire, but everywhere. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to go back to planning for various reasons. So, I mean, how confident are you that, having spoken to landowners and done all the surveys, that this planning application will not have to be revised and come back to future revisits?
It's a difficult one to answer, but I'm fairly confident. This is the work we've done here and the procurement we've gone through for a design and build to actually get the designer and contractor on the ground now, rather than where in past we have to go back is you have a designer design it, the contractor gets involved and says, I can't build it in that way, or I can't do it in this way, and therefore you haven't got the land and the red line, you have to go back and revisit it. Because the procurement strategy we came to this committee last time to get approval from to go into enter into design and build, the contractor is actually driving this. So we've got all the temporary topsoil storage, all the compounds, all the ways of working of which they're directing is already baked into this planning application. So as far as schemes of this scale, I don't think this authority, from my memory of being here 20 years in highways, has ever developed a scheme to this level of detail before going for planning. So I can't say that something couldn't happen in the future, but I think the confidence is high and the likelihood of having to go back is low. There will be non-material amendments, that's a nature of it, but they're not coming back to committee, they're just done at an officer level. I don't think we would have to go back for a new planning. If there was anything, we would likely be able to do it under a Section 73 application because the red line that's in place is robust and well developed already. So to answer, confidence is really high.
So you did say the bridges were pretty straightforward, so hopefully lessons have been learned. But also, so if there's some landowner dispute, who's actually dealing with the landowners? Is that us or is that the contractor?
So as far as the land purchase, that would be the next time we come to this executive, if it's approved today, to seek approval to submit the legal orders, that's the sideways order and the compulsory purchase orders. So that's our next step after submitting planning.
I'm talking in terms of planning. If there's some unforeseen problem arises because of a landowner issue, can that be altered just without having to come back to full planning?
The red line can't be altered, but the red line is robust enough that within the red line you can move access tracks around, footways and things like that. That would be most likely a non-material amendment which can be dealt with fairly easily. Right,
okay, that's fine, I understand. So you've done the red line is obviously how far out from the line of the road, do you know?
Yeah, the red line is robust enough to require...
What's that now? Do you know how far out it is?
So the red line includes not for the construction but also the temporary work, so all the haulage roads to go down, all the machinery and also the topsoil storage to be to one side. So the red line for planning is large. The CPO red line, so that's the compulsory purchase which comes later, that will be more refined because we can't procure more than what we need. But we've made sure that the planning red line is sufficient enough so we don't have to go back for planning, because the one thing you can't change is the red line apart from going through a new application.
I see. And if, say, a landowner is landlocked, which we having to take, are you confident there is no other landlocked issues where, you know, typically where a road goes through a field, a little bit of the field is left stranded, shall we say? Those issues have all been thought through?
Yes. Yeah, we've spoken with all the landowners and their land agents that have been appointed. That's fed into this planning application. We have access tracks running pretty much the length of the route that the county council will own, but it won't be highway, and then we grant way leaves off that access track into the various fields that go through there. So all those discussions have been going on the last year, and we've got to the point of agreement that feeds into this application.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wish to contribute? Okay, recommendations are there on page 11, which is, there are 3 of them that we approve in the change in preferred route, as I think Sam explained the reasons for that. We approve the submission of the planning application and delegate to the Director of Place, in consultation with Councillor Davies, the final form, and submit the said planning application. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. I think that's unanimous. Thank you. That's agreed. Thank you. Thank you, Sam and Highways colleagues, for that contribution. Okay, we'll now move on to the next item, which is Lincolnshire Secure Children's Home land purchase and section 203. So, Councillor Bowkett, or do we go straight? Sorry, Councillor Bradwell, I do beg your pardon. I must apologise there. Confusing you two is not a good move, is it?
Yes, so we're bringing a follow-on paper from the previous one that was at executive setting out the business case, and this is regarding the land now. And obviously we've got a secure unit at the moment, which was built in 1997, and obviously that now is DFE are wanting us to build a larger one. The secure estate for young people across the country is there isn't sufficient places, so it's really complementary, I think, to Lincolnshire County Council that the DFE are wanting us to build a 28-bed one, and they're funding the whole of the build. So I think that's really good. Obviously, this paper is about purchasing some land, and I don't know whether Richard will want to come in with regard to the property side, but you know, officers have been looking for a site for this secure unit for some time, and a site's been found in Sleaford. And we're here today to approve the purchase of that site. So I don't want to hog it all, but I don't know whether...
Thank you. Well, clearly the piece of land identified is key to the position and the service that we need. So I think the area that we found is the right area for the location, and yeah, I think it's a good piece of land. We've got a good design on there. It fits on there well. It actually enables future development if we require to put anything else on there. So I think it's identified a good area, and it fits the services and what we need. Thank you.
Good morning. I've just put together a small presentation which kind of takes you through the journey of the current secure unit to the key decisions that we're seeking today. And I think Rachel was going to pop it on for me. Thank you. Okay. The current Lincolnshire secure unit consists of 12 beds. So we have 11 youth custody beds, and they're for children that have committed really serious crimes. And the secure unit also has 1 children's welfare bed, and that's where children are deemed to be either risk of harm to themselves or risk of harm to others. Currently has 100% occupancy in 2021-22 and also 22-23. There is a national shortage of welfare beds across the country, and at any one day there are 70 young people awaiting a welfare secure bed. There's no scope for expansion at the current site in Sleaford. It's already been enhanced via Department for Education grants. The site's landlocked, and all indications are that it will not be fit for purpose in the future to remain as a secure children's home. Next slide, please. So this just takes you through the history. So Lincolnshire Secure Unit opened in 1997, was an 8-bedded unit. Significant investment from the DFE in 2010 to become a 12-bedded unit. And then coming up to the recent award, the Department for Education is investing significantly in capital to support the growth of not only secure children's homes, but also open children's homes. And we were successful in being awarded, based on our bid, the DFE grant for the whole of the capital build for a brand new secure unit. It will be a flagship building. We have taken the learning from all of the secure estate across the country and internationally. So it's a real innovative build. And then right up today, we've had planning permission granted for the construction of the new secure children's home at the Sleaford Bone Mill site. In terms of the benefits that it will bring the council, so as Councillor Bradwell previously said, this is 70 million of central government capital investment into the county, creating over 100 new jobs in the Sleaford area once completed. The jobs are supported within the local supply chain during construction. And more importantly, net zero, supporting the council's commitment to sustainability through this flagship project. Enhanced reputation, we're already getting to other local authorities looking at our programme of construction and design, we are supporting them as well, so in terms of that learning culture. It will have improved outcomes, not only for Lincolnshire children, but for children across the country that are seeking these secure accommodation placements. And it will prevent a cost pressure that would be realised if the existing unit had to close. It's fully funded and a really strong business model. And I'm now going to pass on to Dave Pennington, who's going to talk you through the design and the construction.
Thank you, Tara. Next slide, please. Just to familiarise yourselves with the site, if you're not already aware, if you're driving south on the A17 and you hit the flyover and you look to your right, effectively what you see is that sort of chilly-shaped site. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, we have a drawing showing how the site is going to be used. What you have at the top northeast quadrant there is just the red indicating the highways improvements that we have to make to gain access to the site. In the centre portion of the site, you have the secure unit itself, and to the south we have land that's also going to be used with solar panels being placed to help make the building being net zero as well. The northeast and northwest quadrants, currently the northwest quadrant is vacant, but could be used for future LCC purposes. But we are also working with Children's Services around looking at placing a SEMH special school on the northeast side of that site as well. So in purchasing this land, we will be maximising and leveraging greater opportunities for the County Council. Next slide, please. As you can see, you've got a 3D view of the secure children's home here. Tara's already said this is a flagship design. To some extent, you can't get away from having separate houses, and you'll see those as the spokes. We've got 5 houses, but we are incorporating many innovative features into this build. One of which I'll just pick out is we're encouraging children to walk to school. So even though you can't tell from this plan exactly what what will happen is that children will leave their house and they will have a walk to the school through open, fresh air. The horseshoe in the middle will be a health and education facility as well. And there are many innovative features that have been built into this facility that have been gathered from best practice and learning from other secure sites around the country. Next slide, please. Here, it's not so easy to see on this slide, but what you've got is there are 2 floors to the secure unit. The image on the left shows you the ground floor, and what we've got is the blue wings are the normal houses. The red wing to the right on the left-hand image is a high dependency unit. You've then got a horseshoe in the centre. The centre is a health, where NHS and health professionals can care for the children, and then to the top we've got a school on site as well, and then the top left we've got a van dock, secure van dock for children coming in, and administration. And on the first floor, which is the plan on the right hand side, is no children will be on the first floor, but we have administrative training facilities for staff and respite areas as well, because as you can imagine, the staff have to deal with some very potentially traumatic incidences, and it's essential that they have a space to move away from, and that's all located on the first floor. Next slide, please. Here we have a couple of images just showing you how the massing of the building and how it will sit in the site. Again, it will have a tall perimeter wall that around the outside of it, as you can see in the bottom right-hand image. But again, as you see in the top right-hand image, we're trying to make courtyards look as friendly as possible within the boundaries and the restrictions of the building that we're trying to build. And the bottom left there is showing the entrance as well, sort of the visitor entrance also. So whilst it is a secure children's home, we are taking every opportunity to try and make it feel homely, to try and make it feel not prison-like, but to also make it welcoming to visitors as well. Next slide, please. So there's 3 key decisions that this paper brings forward to the executive. The first is to complete the purchase of the land, which I won't really go into much more detail on, except to say that we have signed an option agreement, which, whilst we haven't actually purchased the land, it secures the land for our use. Unfortunately, as part of the negotiations around acquiring the land, it came to light fairly late in the negotiation. There's a restrictive covenant on that site, which prevents residential development. The spirit of that covenant was around housing. It wasn't foreseeing a secure children's home. So we have to use Section 203 of the Housing and Planning Act 2016 to override the restrictive covenants on this particular site. So the second key decision in this report is about enacting Section 203. And then finally, the third key decision is around an enabling works contract, and this is around about £2.5 million. And what this will do is allow us to start setting the site up in anticipation of the build, which will start next year. So this allows us to do access roads, this allows us to put fencing up on site and site the cabins ready for when the DfE have given the full grant. And at that point, I'd like to invite the executive for any questions.
I'm going to ask Councillor Stokes now, as Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny, just to report on the debate there.
Thank you, Leader. So, obviously, the Chairman of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee is unable to attend, so I'm doing this report on his behalf. So, at its meeting on the 8th of September 2023, the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee considered the report and unanimously agreed to support the recommendations to the Executive. Support was given to the new secure children's home and its proposed location, which would help to generate economic growth in this area. It was recognised that the existing secure unit was very dated and the current location did not allow for any expansion. So during its discussion, the committee explored the following topics, which were the invoking of the Section 203 powers, which just been mentioned, and assurance was provided that invoking Section 203 to override the restrictive covenants was a managed risk and was a power that had been used by other local authorities to override restrictive covenants. The process used at other local authorities had been examined to ensure the council followed the same route and was not doing anything different. Several lawyers in legal services Lincolnshire have been working on this issue, and external barristers have also been consulted with on multiple occasions. Any challenge to the engagement of these Section 203 provisions would be from an adjacent landowner if they felt the value of their land had suffered a loss. Legal advice had confirmed that there would be no loss suffered by overriding the restrictive covenants due to the nature of the development. All the landowners had been contacted on a regular basis to provide them with an opportunity to comment on the proposals. As this was evidenced, the council would have a very strong case if any challenge was received and would be able to demonstrate that the council had acted reasonably and taken every step to mitigate the risk and engage adjacent landowners. And then they discussed enabling works contract. The cost for the enabling works was negotiated and had already been reduced from the 7.26 million stated in the report. Legal advice had confirmed that the formal decision would still give the council authority to continue with the scheme, even if the final value was less. And then timescales and next steps were discussed. So in relation to the timescales for completion, it was confirmed that the plan was to start on construction in early 2024, with the new secure home being completed at the start of 2026. And with regards to next steps, a full scheme appraisal would be brought through the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee, and then for a decision towards the end of 2023. This would set out the main works contract and would be for the totality of the project and include the full cost of construction. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much for that. So I'll probably ask David Coleman, our Chief Legal Officer, just to anything he wants to add, because obviously it is a restricted covenant. Obviously it's not straightforward, and there is there's some risk that I just think we need to be clear about what the risk is, and confidence that it will be allowed to we will be allowed to override this restrictive covenant.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, there clearly does remain a risk. It's not a small matter to override somebody else's restrictive covenant. A lot of work has gone into making sure that we understand fully what Section 203 means and that all of the requirements of the section have been met. We've looked closely at the balance of interest between the public interest and the private interest of the individuals who have got the benefit of that covenant. And I think the position from my point of view is well described in the response that was given to the Scrutiny Committee. I do think that all of the requirements of the section are met by this decision. I would expect to be able to successfully defend a claim which was brought on the basis of a covenant as a result of the use of Section 203. So while there remains a risk because the restrictive covenant isn't removed, I believe that you can rightly proceed on the basis of confidence that the steps that the Council have taken in relation to the use of Section 203 will mean that it's successfully triggered in this instance.
So are any of the current landowners holding the restrictive covenant, or is it a third party?
Sorry,
Well, there's a restrictive covenant. Is it one of the current landowners who have it, or is it somebody else?
No, the only people who would be able to enforce a restrictive covenant would be people who owned land which benefited from that covenant. So,
but do those people still own the land, or is it
the land is owned by a number of people now?
But some of those have the restrictive covenant, just in terms of risk, or has it been sold on with the restrictive covenant?
Yeah, some have been sold on, but the person who purchases will also have the benefit of the restrictive covenant. So if the land is benefited by the restrictive covenant, the owner at the time will be able...
Yeah, the point I'm trying to make is if you're selling the land and you've got the restrictive covenant, you won't be particularly interested in stopping the sale, because that would... But is how much of it... There are some others there are third parties who hold this in some parts. Is that right?
Yes, there are individual businesses on the adjacent industrial estate who would have the benefit of the covenant and therefore would be able to claim that the council was breaching that covenant in bringing forward the secure home.
Okay. And I just want to anybody wants to add to the debate on this particular, just before, let's say things all go wrong for some reason and we own the land. In terms of risk and value, are we confident that we won't be losing all that, the money we've spent?
Yeah, thank you. No, the land was valued on a commercial basis, and actually it is perhaps at the lower end of if there was a high and a low end, we are proposing to purchase it perhaps at a slightly lower end, which is in the exempt part of the paper. If the project wasn't able to succeed for whatever reason, the land still holds its value as commercial development and is identified as such within the local plan. Okay. So from that perspective, I don't believe it poses a particular risk to the local authority.
Okay, any questions, comments on this section 203 business? Okay, if you're not indicating, I'll assume that we are content with that. Second question. 1 minute we're talking about a secure unit, and then we're talking about children walking to school. So can we just clarify what exactly we're talking about here?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, just to say, so the whole of the unit is contained within the inside and the outside. So it's an open space within the unit so that the children can have that pass through the courtyard, but that is within the secure premises and within the building.
There will be a gate, there'll be guards, effectively. We are, effectively that's what will be, isn't it?
Yeah.
I see. And then, so these houses referred to are for step out, so hopefully troubled children or very troubled children, hopefully some of them will be able to go back to a normal life.
Yeah, so the houses will be where the children live residentially, and then they go to school into the classroom. So that's the separation between the areas in which they live and then the place in which they go to school. So obviously it's about trying to give these young people the best experience possible. Lots of them will transfer to the adult estate, but you're absolutely right. Some of them may transfer back into communities where they've come from, and it's about giving them as much of a chance of being able to do that successfully as possible.
Further questions, comments? Anybody? Councillor Burkett.
Thank you. Well, I just think it's a really good scheme. Obviously, we've got a lot of adults that have complex needs, and I think if we can get to the children before they get to adults and help them, I think it's really good. And the design and how you've done the houses in the school, I think it's really good. So at least they can get some sort of normality back into their lives. So yeah, really good.
McNally.
Thank you, Leader. I'm quite comfortable with the comments of the legal person. It's well worth doing. I think it's disappointing that we've ended up in a society that needs this sort of thing. The one thing I just want a bit of clarity on, and it's nothing to do with the land purchase or anything like that, but at the start of the presentation there was a slide that said so many people have been convicted of a serious crime, and then so many want welfare beds. Can you just explain, are they people that have not been convicted, or I just need to understand that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor McNally. So those who've been convicted obviously are court ordered, so they've been convicted of a criminal, of something criminal, and they'll be given a sentence. Welfare beds we use for young people whose behaviours are putting them at risk. So if I give you an example, we might have young people who, despite all our interventions, are returning to be involved in a gang where they're being exploited, or returning to engage in activity which we know is harmful to them. We have to go before the court for that, so it's still not our decision. We go before the court, but they're not there for a sentence. They're there so we can keep them safe whilst we do some work with them, and then we transfer them on to a more suitable setting. So it's securing them for their own welfare, effectively.
Questions, please? Okay. Right. I mean, obviously, just as a final comment, I mean, it's clear that the current site is not really suitable. It's actually, I've never really understood how it's literally in the middle of a residential housing estate, which it seemed a bizarre place to put such a unit. And I think it is the correct thing to do this, and effectively it will be paid for by the Department for Education, the whole scheme, and they will pay for the building of the unit and associated things. But of course, it's our responsibility to reasonably for us to make sure we acquire the land so that the whole process can start. So on page 57 there are 3 recommendations which basically allow the process to start for us to acquire the land and then and various other things. I won't read it all out because they are quite complicated. So all those in favour of those 3 recommendations, please indicate. Okay, again unanimous, thank you for that. So that is agreed. Thank you for your explanation, quite an important project for Lincolnshire, but also most particularly for children who have a very difficult, troubled life, and also protecting society from those children as well. Okay, we're going to move on now to a non-key decision, which is item 7, which is scrutiny panel A, and their final report on the town centre improvements. So we do have Councillor Dilks here, who chaired that committee. Thank you for you and your committee for doing a substantial piece of work, Phil. And I'll let you now report on the results of your considerations.
Very kind, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's my huge privilege to be able to present the Executive with Scrutiny Panel A's report on how we consider the County Council could help our town centres to thrive, adapt and embrace the changes and challenges of a fast-moving world. After 14 months of focused work by the panel, with excellent support of our officers, in particular I'll mention Vanessa to right of me and Justin Brown, and of course I have to mention Chiara. Thank you, Chiara, for her support throughout. We also had superb contributions from external experts and partners. I would echo your comments in thanking members from across the political divide who served on the panel, in particular our Vice Chairman of the panel, Councillor Tracy Carter. Tracy displayed real drive, dedication and knowledge of our town centres and the business community at the heart of them, especially in her own community of Holbeach. I trust the Executive will find our 100-page report evidence-based and backed up with a robust set of recommendations to support the future of our town centres as diverse, welcoming places to shop, visit and do business. We identified specific strategic areas where the County Council has a role which we think could be used to engage and promote improvement. You'll see our recommendations from page 3 of the report are under the following headings, 6 headings: leadership and policy, high street businesses, placemaking, funding and skills, technologies, innovation and digitalisation, data-driven decision-making and target investment, and green growth. Our report recognises the major changes facing high streets right across the UK, but in particular across Lincolnshire. The rapid growth of internet shopping, for example, which was fast-tracked by the pandemic, the resulting decrease in high street footfall, and the significant threat this is having right now on businesses in many of our towns. But the report also evidences how some of our towns have chosen to embrace their uniqueness and offer people a compelling reason to shop, visit and enjoy spending time in their town. For example, by leveraging in heritage assets or developing greater hospitality or individual independent retailing opportunities. On September the 12th, Councillor Carter, myself and the officers presented our report to the Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee. I'm pleased to say they supported our key recommendations and also offered detailed comments which are attached to the report before you. For example, when considering the key question, what can the County Council do to support our businesses? In addition to the panel's recommendations, members of the committee highlighted the importance of recognising the role and remit of district councils and the need to work in close partnership with them to ensure that we complement and not duplicate service provision. Members also emphasised the need for effective relationship building between the private and public sector, particularly to better understand the needs of businesses to ensure projects aiming to future-proof Lincolnshire towns have the best chance of being realistic and effective. The committee welcomed our suggestion to create a modest pot of funding open to all members of the County Council to bid for, to promote local projects and activities which aim to increase footfall and showcase the unique selling points of their Lincolnshire town. The committee also reflected on the need for reliable public transport, which I'm sure we all agree is crucial for town centres to thrive. In addition to recommendations around placemaking, it's clear absentee landlords can have a depressing impact on a town's aesthetic appearance, but also in reducing the employment offer and opportunity for new businesses, and even impacting on the behaviour of local residents. Members echoed our view that the local planning authorities need to be fully immersed in developing placemaking and future action plans emerging from this review. Finally, members emphasised the importance we gave to data-driven decision-making to help make decisions that will impact the future of towns and the county as a whole. For instance, how we meet the emerging challenge of best developing a local electric vehicle infrastructure and other energy solutions. In conclusion, although we are aware that the picture painted through this report reveals some hardships and challenges on our high streets, what also stands out is that with appropriate and timely support, Lincolnshire's towns have huge potential to flourish and thrive in the future. We believe the County Council should develop its role as a place leader, convener and influencer to help drive positive change in Lincolnshire's high streets, making them more diverse in use, resilient and adaptable, and attractive to new users as exciting places where residents and visitors alike can enjoy new experiences, where businesses can succeed and local employment opportunities grow. I trust the Executive will conclude that our recommendations focus on where the County Council can add value to the activity of other stakeholders. May I commend our report and recommendations to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, thank you. I know you spent a long time, a lot of work has gone into this, and it is a major issue, not just in Lincolnshire, of course, market towns, that many of them are, shall we say, not as vibrant as they used to be, and many of them, high streets, are struggling. And I think the reasons, we know about that. There's the rise of internet shopping, there's out-of-town shopping, there is also the issue of the business rate system, and also, as you said, landlords also, and people not being able to carry on trading in town centres because they can't afford the rent or the rates. I mean, some of those are obviously totally out of control of ourselves, but obviously, I suppose, was the committee ever thought about, for example, in terms of, did they have a view on the reform of the rate system, or that obviously things that we can't directly control? And I think you're right, in two-tier world, that district and county need to work closely together, because it won't work. But there seems to be no recommendations in terms of what government or indeed other policies could be put in place. I don't know if anyone wants to respond to that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, we tried to sort of focus on the difference the County Council could realistically make, given the resources that we've got and the influence that we have got. No, we didn't, frankly, go down the route of trying to sort of change the business rate system. I just think that it was difficult enough to keep focused on what we were, trying to come up with recommendations that were realistic, if I could put it that way. Thank you.
Fair comment. Right, Councillor Woolley, thank you.
Thank you, Leader. And thank you, Councillor Dilts, for the report and indeed your team as well. Can I just go to recommendation 4, A? Can you just explain or get me to understand what it is about 5G infrastructure that you feel you want the County Council to have a greater say on, please?
Thank you, Councillor Hill. So we've seen a number of examples over the past 3 years of 5G facilities being installed on the basis of some national planning criteria, and a number of the members of the scrutiny review felt that it was important to have a local voice as well in terms of influencing that say. So it was about trying to balance the sort of national and local in the decision making about that infrastructure. If I can just go back to the point about business rates, the government will every 4 or 5 years review the business rates process, and maybe taking the point that Councillor Hill raises, one of the things that we need to take forward in the action plan is ensuring that when the government consult about changes to business rates, that we actually raise some of the issues about high street viability that the Scrutiny Committee raised in its report.
Sorry, I mean, there is a view that obviously the whole ethos of the high street needs to change. And any comments about sort of, I know there's been some discussion about enabling people to live above shops and also bring about more activity in the high street. And is there a view in terms of, some people say let's shrink the high street so that there is a core which is very vibrant, and then we can have housing or whatever and the rest of it. I don't know whether Vanessa or Justin wants to answer that, or Phil.
Thank you. I think we had some really positive discussions about the important role of what we might call place when we work in the high street, and having a focus for businesses and shops, and our role within that around the highway, perhaps as the highway authority and the transport that works around there. There was an ambition really to support uniqueness of businesses, so that appeal of people coming into the high street as well, that we felt that we could really support through the growth hub, through the work we do with the visitor economy. But really focusing in on particular places for a unique offer, if you like, in our market towns. And there were some really positive examples. I know at Scrutiny, Louth in particular was highlighted as being a good example of that, others as well across the county. In terms of the planning aspect, we obviously have a role within spatial planning at the County Council, and work with district partners as the local planning authorities, and I suppose that role within spatial planning is something we can focus on too. We talk in the report about being proactive in that leadership space around planning, and so that was something that members were keen that we worked on going forward.
And just going back to people living above shop, I know there was it's quite technical, there is a reason why it doesn't happen at the moment. I don't know if anyone from place knows, and there was talk of reforming the system so that it would enable, which actually brings more life into the high street, as opposed to, you look at, go down the high street, you see all the lower street looking very smart, and then a bit derelict on high because nobody's in there. So I just wonder, does anybody understand and is there a role for lobbying on that?
Yes, so apologies for not addressing that. We have proactively responded to the planning reform bill in that space, as Councillor Davey signed off the response on that. And that is currently with Parliament with the rest of the planning reform discussions.
So is that in the bill?
That is one of the considerations within the bill, yes.
Yeah, currently not law. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. I kind of almost want to speak as this is a town centre member, really. And I agree with some of the report, Councillor Dilks, but I think you're missing the point, if I can be so bold, in some instances. I think in a degree we seem to make, as a nation, make this really complicated, don't we? We wonder why people don't go into town centres. Well, why don't they go into town centres, and where do they go? You can go into town centres across Lincolnshire at the weekend, and even on a Saturday morning, they're quiet compared to what they were 10, 20 years ago. Yet you go to a shopping centre that's potentially further away, and they are heaving. So clearly people are still going to shops, undeniable. Why are they choosing not to go to our market towns? Well, obviously lack of shops is an issue, but consideration that falls within our remit has to be given to things such as transport. You know, too many of our towns have, to all intents and purposes, dual carriageways going through the middle, and they are overtaken by cars, and that does make things difficult, and it does make them unpleasant environments, and we are doing things about them. But moreover, the big one, and the report, I fundamentally disagree with one of your statements, says that the cost of parking isn't an issue. Well, of course it's an issue. That's why when I get dragged, and I mean dragged, kicking and screaming, to Meadowhall, or drugged, and find myself in this car park, the one thing I'm not doing, while bracing myself for the cost of going to Frankie and Benny's, is looking for change to find and pay for parking. And let's be candid, local council, too many local councils in Lincolnshire fund themselves off the back of parking charges, and that's a fundamentally flawed model, because you are actively discouraging people coming into town centres. Not only from the principle of charging, but also the faff. And I might probably sound like the world's laziest shopper when I say this, but having to find a parking space and then finding change, because you can guarantee if there's two machines, one will be broken. I guarantee it. I think that's done on purpose so we all get more walking in. And then you'll go to the machine, and then you'll have to decide as you arrive, how long am I going to stay here? Which instantly destroys any kind of longevity and linger ability, because you will have paid via card or via cash for a limited amount of time. It's an absolutely retrograde step way of doing it, and I think rather than, with the greatest respect to colleagues, worrying about high-level strategy and spatial planning, if we could fix some of these really low-level small things, I think we'd see far more return on investment. We've got to stop milking shoppers to fund local services like this, because it's just not working. And if you disagree with me, I was in Grantham High Street on Saturday. Come and stand there with me, because just people aren't coming, but they are going to big shopping centres. My final point, just while I am slightly ranting, apologies, is again looking at Grantham, is it a surprise that the town centre is dead when in the last 25 years the local planning authority has allowed 6 out-of-town planning decisions that have built shopping centres within walking distance to the town centre? We can't be surprised that the high street's unattractive when there are bigger units, ironically, that all have free parking, within walking distance to the town centre. None of this is complicated. We need to stop thinking it is.
They all looked at me then. I guess one of the first recommendations in there is about a debate with local transport boards, and that might be the place where we can look at that in more detail. I know from when we were working on Historic Lincoln back in 2015 that there was an ambition to change the paying system to pay on departure, and the cost of doing so was significant. That was before parking apps, and actually we might have the opportunity to model some different behaviour in terms of the way parking apps are used, recognising the difficulties of digital technology in all of that.
Well, I'll let Councillor Bradwell come in, and then big renovation, Councillor Davies goes shopping. Well, this is a shock. Revelation. Will we ever get over the shock of that? Anyway, Councillor Bradwell.
No, I was just going to say, because what Richard is saying, and Richard and I often disagree with each other, but have to agree with him today, because actually I live at Woodall, so I shop in Woodall, I go to Horncastle, I go to Louth. Those places, and although they said Louth wasn't that busy, I do think COVID has affected towns. I really do, but we have got no out of town shopping centres to go to. And actually, you know, you go to Horncastle or wherever, and it's buzzing. And I do think Richard's right. People, you know, especially if you've got a family, it's much easier to go to an out-of-town shopping. You park up, you get the kids, and you go in where you want to shop, and then you come back and go home. And I suppose I'm a lot older and a granny, and I'm going and have got probably lots more time than families have. But I just think that I think that is one of the main issues. The fact that and it's same with Boston. You know, so many out-of-town places to shop there. Boston Town Centre doesn't get that busy now, and plus there's hardly any shops in Boston Town Centre.
Yeah, I mean, I say it's not unique to Lincolnshire. So if we went down, for example, the LJ conference in Bournemouth. Bournemouth used to be a really strong retailing dead. It's sad to see, actually. I mean, I'll slightly counter what, I mean, I think there's a valid point about the car park charging, but what I would say, what interests me is that those places in Lincolnshire where are doing pretty well, Lincoln, Stamford, and Lincoln, for example, the car parking charging is high, actually, and they even charge at night, which I think goes against the grain, but they charge a lot, but then there are still lots of people who still come and are happy to come and park their car, even though they know they're going to be paying a lot of money. So is it, if you get it right, people will come anyway, and if you get it wrong, they won't come. I think there's an issue there, but I think Councillor Davis is right to raise it, but I'm not sure it's quite as simple as if you don't have, because I go to places where there's a minimal charge, you know, and frankly, it's not making any difference, you know, and it's still, places are dead. This is across the country. So I just think it's probably not quite as simple as that, but I do think there is a point, but I'm not sure it's the total point. Councillor Petroy.
Thank you. As someone that's probably worked in retail for the last 30 years or more, shopping centres are always free. You never pay for parking. Out of town units, you get up to 3 hours free. So you can go there for 3 hours, not pay a thing. I think the key thing for anywhere is you've got to give someone a reason to go there. Now, Lincoln's been redeveloped. You know, it looks fantastic. You know, that's where the public and the private sector have worked together with an overall vision to redevelop that. And it looks great. You're then going to get brands and shops and retailers that actually want to come because they can see a vision and they see their competitors come in. They can see them making money and they will come and invest. And until we get that overall vision, parking is one thing, business rates we touched on. And, you know, until you get that complete package, we are never going to regenerate our high streets. You know, we have to have a look at that bigger picture and look at all these issues in the round, because there are companies out there that are doing very well in retail, and they are expanding, doing, you know, 100, 200 shops, new shops a year. Now, there's 5 or 6 companies out there that are doing that, and if we can get 1 or 2 of them back into our high streets, you know, that gives you your linchpin to then drive people back into that area. And I think residential as well is a very key thing. You go to London, most shops, most shopping centres have got that's it, it's gone. Have residential built into them, so it definitely is a key to that as well, and the key to regenerating, you know, the centre of our towns. Thank you.
Any further questions, comments? I think yes, Councillor Dills. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those. Thanks for the debate. Really interesting. I mean, I don't disagree with what Richard Davis says there, particularly. You know, car parking is a challenge. You know, I accept that, but I think the other Richard Bootroyd sort of hits on the. You know, it's. I think the real challenge is what can towns themselves offer. Why should we want to go to that particular town in the first place? And you know, how can they attract other people in? And it is through the leisure, you know, developing leisure pursuits in towns, developing the sort of the historic asset that is perhaps close by, etc. But yeah, sure, parking is a big challenge, and as you say, districts particularly, are largely funded or receive a lot of money from car parking. So, but out of town is an issue in my ward. In Deeping, we've had a controversy over an out of town, just on the edge of our development. The one supermarket wanted to come, and we wanted that supermarket to be built in the middle of town so that it increased the footfall and supported existing businesses. And the business club, particularly in the Deeping, were right behind that decision. A lot of people sort of, as they say, come back and say, well, why haven't we gone for the out of town one? That's the reason. We want to promote the town centre in the Deepings, but across Lincolnshire as well. Sorry, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Yes, the County Council has some land in the Deepings. If you're looking for a convenient out of town, I'm sure we can have discussions later, Phil. Brilliant road access as well. Thank you for that. Right, okay, so unfortunately Councillor Davey is very poorly today. I know he was hoping to come, and I know he's been heavily involved with helping with the production of this report. So
he did give some very supportive comments at the Environment and Economic Scrutiny Committee. Thank you.
So obviously the recommendations there on page 101 is that we consider it, and then we, within 2 months, the executive, and I think led by Councillor Davey, will respond to it. And I think we've had a really useful debate, and actually it has triggered all sorts of thoughts and discussions about how the County Council, in this case, can actually do its bit to try and help revive those parts, those town centres which aren't currently really very vibrant. So those are the 2 recommendations. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. No, I think that was unanimous, so thank you for that. Right, so thank you for that, and thank you, Councillor Dilks and team, for doing that, and your support team alongside you. Finally, we move on to item 9 then, which is appointments to outside bodies. Nigel, do you want to just discuss this? So basically there is one, this executive, which is appointment to the LGA, I think that's correct, isn't it? No, it's the CCA and the County Council Network, and I believe that there's 4 representatives from the County Council. It is politically balanced, so with the departure of Councillor Parker, the Labour group, or the opposition groups, have nominated Councillor Karen Lee. So are you agreed that Councillor Karen Lee should be the representative? Thank you. That's agreed, unanimous. And with that, I conclude the meeting, and thank you for your attendance.